Welcome to today's session, which is What's New in SharePoint 2016, hosted by Combined Knowledge. The reason we put the session together today was to help a lot of our existing customers and potential new customers start to understand some of the benefits of moving to SharePoint 2016. My name's Rob and I'm going to be hosting this 1-hour session today. My current role is I work as a SharePoint and Office 365 trainer, and over the past 8 or 9 years now I've worked with hundreds of different customers to help them make good use of Microsoft SharePoint, Office 365 and a series of related different products. So we work with a whole variety of companies, from charities that only have 20 or 30 people all the way up to multinationals. So as we go through the session, not only are we going to share with you what some of the benefits are of migrating from your existing versions to SharePoint up to 2016, I'll also talk through some real-life business scenarios as to where some of these benefits would actually start to apply. Okay, so not just what we've got and where it is, but also how it might be useful. Just to give me a little bit of perspective, let's just talk a little bit about where SharePoint's coming from and where it's heading in the future. What you should find is you can answer my questions either in the questions window or in the chat window. So first question for you guys is, which version of SharePoint are you using at the moment? So you should find you can click into the chat or the questions window and you can let me know what version of SharePoint you're using. So I've listed up some of the choices. What tends to happen when we ask these questions is we find with our existing customers there's quite a variety. So let's just take this as a quick poll here. I can see loads of answers coming in. Okay, so in the session today we've got everything from people using 2007 all the way up to 2013, but the majority at the moment, just as a quick look through there, looks like the majority are around about 2010, and we've got a couple of people that are saying that they're using SharePoint in Office 365, so quite a variety. So to make my life a little bit easier, rather than me talking about all the benefits of moving from SharePoint 2001 all the way up to SharePoint 2016, I'm going to remove some of these options. I'm just going to make my life a bit easier. So during these first few demonstrations today, I'm going to talk about the benefits of moving from SharePoint 2007, 2010 and 2013 all the way up to SharePoint 2016. The reason I've chosen to do this at the start of the demonstration is that when we go out and we visit our customers, we find that they're not always aware of what their existing software can do, let alone what the new versions are going to do for them. So we'll go through each version and we'll talk about the major improvements that were made in each version. So for example, if you're one of the customers that have just said, hey, we're using SharePoint 2007 at the moment, potentially you've got several years of benefits that you're going to get by jumping to 2016. So you're going to get the benefits of what came new with 2010 and 2013 and 2016. So we're going to run through each version briefly. We are going to end up spending most of our time in 2016, of course, but by doing this, it's going to give us a good, healthy understanding of what the benefits are. Okay, so we're going to go all the way from 2007. We're going to do a whirlwind history tour of all the significant benefits of moving up to 2010, 2013, and then finally the most interesting one perhaps at the moment, which is 2016. So that's where we're headed. Something else that I want to do just to help understand the scope of what we're going to do today is I just want to say for a moment, this kind of old phrase, we can't really be comparing apples and oranges. There's some things in here that are not easy to compare. So just to give you an idea before we make a start on the session, what I'm going to be talking about typically is the on-premises versions of SharePoint. So all those numbers that I just showed you, SharePoint 2007, 2010, 2013, 2016, they're on-premises versions of SharePoint. If you're not sure what that means, if you're new to SharePoint, that means that customers install it on their own servers and typically they host it themselves or they pay a hosting company to do it. Okay. The alternative to that, which 3 of you have just said that you're using already, is SharePoint Online. Okay. The reason that I'm going to say for now they're apples and oranges, so they're quite difficult to compare, is with SharePoint on-premises, typically what's happened traditionally is about every 3 years we get a new version of SharePoint. Okay, so for 3 years, not a lot happens, then all of a sudden we get a brand new version and we jump in functionality. So for SharePoint on-premises, it's quite easy for me to say, right, this is what you could do in 2010. We then waited a few years and in 2013 we got all these new buttons. We waited a few years and in 2016 we got all these new buttons. Office 365, it's not so easy to compare because SharePoint Online or SharePoint in Office 365 changes all the time. So we don't really have versions of SharePoint in Office 365 anymore. Potentially SharePoint Online in Office 365 is changing all the time. So effectively, if you have SharePoint Online, you already have the newest version of SharePoint that's available. It's only for the on-premises customers where we can more easily say, right, you're currently at 2013, you're going to upgrade to 2016. So all of these numbers, if I just go back for a second, these ones we're going to talk about are all featuring the on-premises versions. So just to confirm, everything that we're going to see in terms of benefits, you will still be able to do in SharePoint Online. So all of the things that came in and were new with 2007, 2010, 2013 and 2016, you're going to be able to do all those online as well. But the way I'm going to describe them for now is by comparing the on-premises editions. Okay, so you can see what I mean. These are kind of apples and oranges. The on-premises, pretty much every 3 years we get a major edition. That's traditionally how most of the time it's worked. Whereas Office 365 SharePoint potentially changes almost every day. Okay, so that's just to set the scene a little bit. Just to confirm, it is a 1-hour session today. I've got a timer that I've just set that's going to beep at me in about 50 minutes and when I'm starting to wrap up, so that will keep me going along. So when you hear the beeper, you'll know we're near the end of the session. And just to confirm, the main topics that we're going to run through, we're going to see if you're in 2007 now, which we've got 4 of you that are, the benefits that you're going to get by jumping forwards 9 years of progress. If you're in 2010, we're going to see the benefits that you'll get by jumping 6 years forward. And again, it looks like most people are in 2010 version. So we'll see all of the benefits that you get by jumping from 10 to 16. So that hopefully will be pretty cool for you guys. And then finally, we have a whole bunch of you, what's that, about 5, 6 people again that are also on 2013. So we'll see by making a smaller step from 2013 to 2016, you'll get less benefits, but there's still a whole host of things we can look at. And then finally, towards the end of the session, we've got one slide that just talks about some of the things that we're going to lose when we move forward to SharePoint 2016. So the majority of things are cumulative. So all the benefits of 2007 roll forward to 2010, all the benefits of 2010 roll forward to 2013 and so on. So generally we're getting more and more functionality, things are getting more intuitive all the time. But at some point Microsoft says, oh, hang on a minute, we've got some functionality now which is duplicated or never worked very well and we don't want to support it anymore. And Microsoft have said just for a handful of things, very small numbers, so nothing to worry about. There are some things that they're no longer going to allow us to do in SharePoint 2016. So I've got a slide for that, but it's not a big scary slide. Hopefully most of the things that we're going to lose are not going to worry you. Okay, so that's pretty much the agenda for today. Some of the things we're going to do to begin with, I'm just going to do through a slide deck, just so I can quickly cover it off. Just to reassure you, because we're covering so much stuff today, I am recording the session. So if you're thinking, oh, I've not had time to make all these notes and I've not provided a manual for you to, or a course book for you to follow today, don't worry, all the slides that I'm working from and the video of this session, we will make available after the session. Okay? And we're going to do that because the session is quite fast-paced today. So start at the beginning, and as we said, we've got a whole host of people today that are in SharePoint 2007. For some of us, this is a bit of a blast from the past, looking back at a 2007 site. Actually, internally here at Combined Knowledge, we have pretty much every version of SharePoint still running. Some of them are just test environments, but I do still get to use 2007 with some of our customers. So when we move from 2007 over to 2010, which is our first step today, we see that we get quite a facelift. So if we just overlay that again, so from 2007 to 2010, it's quite a significant change. You can see the branding changed. We can see a whole load of changes to the formatting. So it looks pretty different. So let me just go through a whirlwind tour of some of the key benefits that came in with 2010. And we still get all of these benefits now in 2016. The first benefit that we got was we got the ribbon interface. So in SharePoint 2007, we had old-style drop-down menus. We had headings such as new and settings and actions, and none of those headings really made any sense, and they were a bit bizarre in terms of the naming, and end users told Microsoft it didn't make sense, it wasn't intuitive. So Microsoft said that's okay, we have a better way of doing this. Instead of old style drop down menus, we're going to move to the ribbon. Okay, so we have large icons that appear at the top of the screen, we have a few ribbon tabs, and everything's simpler and more intuitive to use. Okay, so that was a big step straight away. Also in 2010, Microsoft added a whole load of document functionality or document features, and actually a lot of people still aren't aware of these. So a brief mention of some of the things that came in as we moved to 2010. We had document IDs, which was a feature. So if you're not familiar with features, features are a piece of functionality that you can switch off or on. As we go through, particularly to help the people that are not so proficient at the moment with SharePoint, we'll just kind of highlight some of these keywords. So some of these things we're about to talk about right now are features, and these are things that you can effectively switch on or off within a site. So let's say that for now. So document IDs, we could switch that on within a site or a group of sites, and what that would mean is each document that we upload then gets a unique ID. One of the benefits of that, if you're going to switch that on and start to use that, not just in 2010, but in 2016 as well, is that automatically you can click on a document, you can get a URL from that document, and that document URL does not need to include the name of the document, and it does not need to include the actual location of the document, such as the library or the folder that it's stored in. So this has been available since 2010. The trick is you've got to go and look in your features list and you've got to switch it on. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So we still use that in 2016 as well, so we may well glimpse that a bit later on. Another thing that came in which is pretty cool in 2010 was document sets. Let me write this one down. So document sets is what I like to think of as super folders. In SharePoint, we have a bit of an unusual relationship with folders. Generally, we're told folders are bad, and we should try and not use folders, particularly lots of subfolders. And then every now and again, Microsoft kind of break their own rules and say, here's an improvement to folders. And we're going to see, even in 2016, Microsoft have improved folders and made them better than they used to be. So we've been told for years folders are generally bad, try not to use too many of them, and then they bring out a few things every now and again that make us really want to use these special folders. So document sets are still available in 2016, but they were introduced in 2010. Just to mention what they do briefly, again for these ones I'm not going to demo them, but just to mention them so everyone knows that they're going to be useful still when you get to 2016. Document sets allow you to create a series of related documents very quickly and very easily. So the classic example of that is that if I'm in a document library where we're creating new projects, a new project might require a resource plan, a budget request form, and a schedule, maybe like a Microsoft project file. So each new project request involves these 3 files. What I could do is make a content type within SharePoint of the type document set. It would appear in the library. So for example, I'll kind of demo from here just as a quick idea. So for example, if I was in a library and someone's created one of these special document sets, I could go new, and in here it could say new project request. And when someone clicks on new project request, it could automatically then load up on my screen with a series of files to fill in. So it could be a series of templates that are ready to fill in. And when I save them, they're grouped together within the document set. So again, it looks a bit like a folder, but the idea is I can very quickly get started with a set of related documents. Document sets allow me to do a few other things as well. So document sets can also be approved and rejected all as one group. So typically if you're using workflows, there's a good question. How many of you are kind of really into workflows at the minute within your SharePoint current version? Are we using workflows at all? Just again in the questions window if you want to throw that in there. Yeah, okay. So quite often a lot of people still believe that you can only run workflows against an individual document. One of the exceptions to that is you can run a workflow against a document set, which is like a folder, but it can do more than a folder. When you run a workflow against the document set, the outcome perhaps could be that the document set is approved or rejected. So you could build a workflow and it could run against a document set rather than just an individual document. So for me, again, if I have a project plan, which involves 3 documents, rather than getting them approved one at a time, it might be appropriate to submit the whole document set, have a workflow run, a normal approval or feedback workflow, and people respond, and it then mark the whole document set as approved or rejected, rather than having to go through 3 individual documents. So again, that's been available since 2010, and it's going to continue to be available in 2016. So we'll again, one of the reasons people have never seen that, or maybe heard of it but never actually noticed it in the interface, is by default back here in 2010 you had to switch it on. So it was another one of these features you had to go into your site settings, you had to go into the features list, and you had to switch it on. Because we're going to mention a few features today, let me just show you briefly. If anyone's thinking, no, I don't get what features are, here I am in a team site. So this is a 2016 team site. If I want to switch a feature on for workflow or document sets or document IDs, or there's loads of good ones in there that we'll mention today, I could head into settings and site settings. For some of you, straight away, you might notice that, hang on a minute, what's that cog? Instead of the old site actions menu, which we used to have back in 2010, we now have a little settings cog. Yep, same as we had in 2013. From the settings, I can get to site settings, and tucked away in there, I can go to site collection features. So there's features that I can switch on at that level, assuming I am a site collection admin, which I am today, or I could go to manage site features, and again there's a series of features I could enable within there. Okay, so features are not a new thing. In fact, they're quite old-fashioned now. They're not considered really very trendy anymore. So if you've just learned about features because we've mentioned it today, maybe after the session don't go to all your colleagues, hey, I know all about features, I'm really cool. They'll go, no, that's kind of old-fashioned. Features are good to know about because there's a lot of stuff historically that way, but features is kind of an older way of working right now. So it's good to know about it, but it's not really cutting edge. Okay? It's still used, so we need to know about it, but it's not really cutting edge. So let's keep moving on. The content organizer, I'm not as excited about this, but this is another feature that you could switch on, and it's been available since 2010. This works a little bit like the rules within Outlook. You can set a rule up to say, if someone sends me an email and it contains the word like work, automatically move all the work-related stuff to my deleted items, and I'll pretend I didn't see it. So that's how my rules work, and you could do something pretty similar to that. So within here we could say users could upload files to a particular library. Automatically a series of rules could run in the content organizer, and it could move things from that library to other libraries. It can even move things to other sites as well. So when you're talking about a business process that you're working on, and you've got a series of documents that need to be uploaded and then moved to an archive or somewhere else, or onto a different SharePoint site, using the content organizer can be one way of moving things between site collections. So normally that's been a difficult thing to do, moving documents or document sets between site collections, but the content organizer is able to do it. Okay. So again, you switch the feature on, it would light up a series of options within the site, and away you go. For now, I'm just going to give you these headings and the ideas of what they can do, so that when we get up to 2016, we can see, well, what exactly is 2016 doing for us? Okay, so for now, these are all things, and they're going to continue to work the same in 2016. Just as a little disclaimer, I've only been using SharePoint 2016 since Microsoft invented it, so I've not had it very long. 2016 is still pretty new. I can't claim to have been using it for years and years. So when I'm saying at the moment, this stuff is all going to work the same in 2016, Microsoft are still reserving the right to change that. They've not released the final public release yet. And indeed, when they do, there might well be updates to that fairly quickly after. So yes, I'm going to say for now, I've tried these things and they still work in the same way. They're still available. But remember, Microsoft could cheat, and they could change this after I've recorded this session. Okay, so there's my little disclaimer for today. What else have we got? As we moved into SharePoint 2010, we've got improved search. So for example, when someone searches, we've got improved refinements on the left-hand side. We'll talk about more search improvements when we jump to 2013, but the idea that Microsoft was spending money on search even back in 2010 is a good idea to have. Pretty much in SharePoint 2010, if you wanted to have really good search, you typically had to buy an add-on to make your search really good. You'd buy an extra product to make it happen. So good news is the story's changed, and as we move forwards, the search gets better and better. But in 2010, the search was slightly improved, but not massively. Something that was really a game changer as we moved into SharePoint 2010 is manage metadata. So this one is definitely worth a mention on the drawing board here. So this is something that a lot of customers still avoid, surprisingly. But let's say that for now, this is something that's pretty important. Potentially, it could be really a central object within your SharePoint environment. So manage metadata is a central database. And what it allows me to do is store a series of terms or phrases. So back in SharePoint 2007, we didn't have this central database. In 2007, there wasn't such a thing. So what that would mean is if I created a list and elsewhere within another site collection I made another list, and perhaps within that list I added a column, and in that column I wanted a drop down. There's a bit of a story coming here. What would tend to happen is I'd have to repeat myself again and again. So for example, in SharePoint 2007, where some of you are now, you could create drop-down columns. They look quite pretty and they work quite well. Let's say though those columns needed to have all the departments in your company. So it needed to have sales, HR, IT, finance, and then you needed those same fields, that same data available in another site collection. Pretty much you'd be faced with recreating it again. And if you needed that same data again in a drop-down in another site collection, you'd be creating it again. So you'd have this duplication of data. So it's for standard information that you wanted people to use, particularly for tagging. Tagging is a good phrase. So for tagging or labeling information, which continues to be important going forwards into 2016. So the great news was managed metadata was not restricted per site collection, which columns always have been. You could go into this database, you could put your words into there, your terms, so you could put sales, finance, HR, IT. You could then use that database within all of the site collections within your farm, or if you're in Office 365, all of the terms are available across your entire tenant, all the way across all the site collections. So that's pretty exciting to be able to standardize the tagging across our entire SharePoint environment. Whether it's on premises or not doesn't matter, we can do it in both. So again, we still continue to be able to do that. So if you've been in 2007 and you've been told to create columns and do tagging and you've been thinking, this just feels really repetitive, then the good news is managed metadata helps with that. So just to confirm, for those of you that haven't seen it before, up in 2016 as an example, if I go into settings and site settings, underneath the heading of site administration, there's this link here called term store management. So again, a lot of you, even some of you that said you were SharePoint 2013 people, you still may have never clicked on that link because you know you're getting on with your day-to-day work and you've never sat down and read a SharePoint book, or maybe you've never been on any formal training. So this thing's been here since 2010 and it's really worth you investigating. If you're building an environment with a series of site collections especially, it's a really great thing to be aware of. If I have a quick look in here, let's just see. I think I have permissions. This one, perfect. There we go. So I do have permissions into that one. That's great. I can see in here potentially there's a series of different phrases. So I can see these, and these could be used for tagging then within my lists and libraries. This can be used for other things as well, but for now, in the short amount of time we have today, I've been able to tell you that it's important and show you where it was. So managed metadata allows us to standardize tagging with the same words and phrases throughout an entire environment. It also can help with building navigation and doing other things as well, but at least we've had time to mention it briefly. And again, in 2016, it's still going to work in basically the same way. Okay, so from the testing I've done with that so far, it's still going to work in the same way. It's been good since 2010, so Microsoft, I guess, didn't see any need to make any major changes. We're nearly there with our 2010 benefits. We can see that anyone that's been on 2007 still is missing out big time already. In-place records management. This is so cool. In fact, it's so cool that I wasn't going to do this, but let me show you. I might come unstuck here because I don't think I've really played with this much in 2016, but I think this is such a cool idea. And again, hardly any customers have ever seen this. When we talk to them, they go, no, I just didn't even know it was possible. So the idea is, I could have some sort of a document, and just to make it interesting, let's say it's a photograph. And this document has been edited and changed and has now been approved for use within a magazine article. So at this point, we want to make sure that this photograph is kept and it's in its original form and no one changes it anymore. So effectively, we have our requirement for it to become a record. Okay. So people say, well, that's okay. All I'll do is I'll go in and I'll change the security of it. And at that point, it will become a record, or I'll move it to a site that people can't get into, and that makes it a record. Well, actually, in SharePoint, since 2010, there has been an official way of making things records. There is an option to declare and undeclare records. The reason that most people have never seen it before is that it does not appear in the ribbon by default. So you can see there's a bit of a pattern here. Loads of stuff that's been available since 2010, and hardly anyone knows about it. So I don't mind people knowing about stuff and just thinking it's rubbish, that's fine. Not needing stuff that you're aware of, but it's kind of upsetting to me when people just aren't aware of this stuff. So let me go in and have a quick look at this. I'll tell you what, before I do, how many people have seen in-place records management before? How many people have seen a padlock in the ribbon up here before? Just a quick, I know some of you, I know we've got some really hardcore SharePoint people in today. Okay, we're about 50-50, so about half the people have seen it and half haven't. So very briefly, because it's a real quick thing to demo, and also this is a good example of a feature, let's go and have a look. So there's two places it could be. It's a feature, so it could be in two places. If I go settings and site settings, there's two places it could be. It could either be a site collection feature, some things are switched on there, or it could be a site feature. Okay, so there's two levels it could be. So if I have a look at both, just so we've seen, so if I go site collection features, we can see in here we've got things like document IDs, document sets, which is my super folders, and also we've got in-place records management. So amazingly, this thing that's been around since 2010, even in SharePoint 2016, is still switched off by default. So I guess Microsoft is saying we've got this cool thing, but we're not sure that everyone needs it. So we're going to put it into the software. When you buy the software, when you buy SharePoint, you get this in-place records management nowadays, but you're going to have to research it yourself, and you're going to need to switch it on. So now that we know about it, that's not a problem. We can switch it on. It shouldn't prompt me for any license keys or anything. I activate it. The bits were already there. There's no downloads or anything. So it's pretty quick. The other thing I need to do just to get this going, and this is the same for a lot of these features, when you go into settings and site settings, what's happened quite often is when you switch the feature on, somewhere within this window, so somewhere in here, it's a good look spotting things in here because it's a bit of chaos basically. Somewhere in there I've gained some extra options. Sometimes it'll be one option, other times it'll be 3 or 4. So in this particular example, I've gained the record declaration settings. So I think whether you can spot these quickly or not is a kind of a man versus woman thing. Quite often I'll switch these things on. I know somewhere it will say record declarations and I still can't see it. Mostly if there's any ladies on the course, they'll go, oh, Rob, you're an idiot. It's there at the bottom. And, you know, I think women's brains are just more powerful than men's. I'm pretty sure that's the truth. So for us guys, if we're struggling to find things when it appears in here, because stuff's not alphabetical, what I always do is control and F for find, and then start to type in what I'm looking for. So I'll start to type in record, and then it's going to highlight it for me. So honestly, I do that at least twice a day, even though I work with this all the time. So I normally know the name of it, but can never spot it. Okay, so Control F, find it, away you go. I'm going to go into record declaration settings. I'm going to do this ever so quickly. I'm just going to go and switch on in-place records. So I'm not going to spend any time. We've only got 1 hour to show you loads of cool stuff today. We've only got 1 hour. So what that should mean, if I give it a couple of seconds to just deal with what's happened there, is if I head back to one of my libraries now, and if I just refresh this page, I'm just going to go F5 just to give it a bit of a kick. So what should happen, and I'm going to give it another kick with F5 again, what should happen is in the ribbon now I gain this padlock. Right, I'm just going to double check. So because that's not applied straight away, and because I did it quickly, I'm just going to check that I definitely hit the right one. Available in all locations, yes. So I did hit the right one. No, I think all it is just the screen's not refreshing quickly enough for me to see it. Haha. So what I might have to do is come back in just a moment. So what should be happening is up here, I should be getting the padlock to declare as a record. And at the moment, it is just not there right now. Just going to have a quick look at something in here. Yeah, all that looks fine. So I have applied it. And as I said, that was, I think, the first time I've done that in the 2016 one. I should be getting within the ribbon now the padlock, and it's not there. So what I'll do is I'll make a note, and after I've done a couple more demos, I'll come back and have a look again. I've definitely switched it on in the right way. It should now be available there. I'm doing Control F5 to refresh, which is what I would always do in all my other versions, and it's still not there. Okay, so that's what I'll get for getting excited and showing you stuff that I've not tried in 2016. Oh, someone said they saw it in the drop-down then. Let me have a look again. Someone said they saw the declare record in there. No, I've not got my declare record at the moment. No, I think just partly because of the time we've got and the fact that that's just not working, I think I'm going to have to just leave that one behind for now. So you might have to take my word for that at the moment. Basically, it would be around here. We would have a padlock. You would click on it, and what would happen is that item would then be locked. That works every time I do that in 2010, 2013. Someone's saying, yeah, there was a shortcut in compliance. Let's go and check. So in there, it has declare record. Yeah, it is there. So I came to check in here just to see that the record status was working. So that's a sign that, you know, things are switched on successfully. So maybe this is a change that I wasn't aware of yet. I've discovered something exciting and new that they've removed it from the ribbon. But yeah, I could do it this way, like declare as record. Really, it's neater when it's in the ribbon, which is how it's always worked before. So if I go the long way, and then if I refresh the page, just to get that done, there we go. So it's nice just to get it successful. Just to prove that it's worked, I'm logged on as the owner of this whole SharePoint environment. So I'm the owner of everything, and I still can't delete, and I still can't check out, and I still can't edit. Okay, so that's a good example of a feature, switching one on. The only thing that's not a good example is that it's not in the ribbon anymore, and I didn't know that. So we're learning still. Just to confirm, the way I had to declare that for now was I had to go into the compliance details window, and in here I went and declared it. So I'll have to check if that's by design, that it's not in the ribbon anymore. It seems strange that it's been removed from there. Okay, so try not to get too sidetracked because I have so much other stuff to show you. So what I'm going to do next is just mention briefly social. So within 2010 we gained blogs. We can still use blogs now, blog sites. They're a whole type of site. If you're a individual or a department that wants to share information, maybe a series of information, whether it's about software or company policies, rather than sending out as a series of emails and everyone just ignoring it or thinking, oh, what a long email, you could choose to host it on a blog site within SharePoint. So instead of a team site, you create a blog, and within there you can create posts and you can reply to them, and it looks quite pretty. We can also do calendar overlays, which means if you've got 2 or more calendars within a SharePoint site, the same as in Outlook, where you can show your calendar and one of your colleagues' calendar. Now within a page in SharePoint, you can overlay your calendars. So if you've got 3 or 4 related calendars, maybe one for health and safety meetings, one for finance meetings, and so on, and they're all calendars in SharePoint, you can choose to overlay them. So there's an overlay button in the ribbon. And then finally, in 2010, we got wiki pages. Wiki pages are a type of page that are easier to create than web part pages. Pretty much the most frustrating thing in SharePoint 2007 is that most of the pages are web part pages. They're frustrating to create and work with. So wiki pages literally means quick pages or easy pages, allows us to create pages. Just in case anyone's not really done much of that, by default in 2016, pages within a team site, if I go to add a page, will normally be a wiki page. Let's just create a quick one just for 1 second there, just to have done that. So kind of the definition of a wiki page is that I can just click and type and save it. So if this was a web part page, I wouldn't just be able to type. And if it was a web part page, I normally wouldn't just be able to press save. So within a few seconds, I've created a page. It's not a very good page, but wiki pages are fast, if not structured. So by moving to SharePoint 2016, you will get all these benefits. So all this stuff still works. They've hardly changed. Search has improved beyond this, but pretty much all these are going to be there. There's a question there, can we add media into a wiki page? Yes, you can. So in a wiki page, you can still use web parts, but you don't have to put them in particular places like web part zones. You can put your web parts wherever you want on the wiki page, and you can include potentially video, audio, pictures. Yep. So wiki pages are still full functioning. You know, they're very rich. So the good news is we then move up a gear, getting closer to the newest version. So from SharePoint 2010 to SharePoint 2013, look at the overlay. Wow, it got another major facelift. You know, 2010 was like this, and it was okay. We were quite happy in 2010. We thought, you know, we're the kings of it. It was great. SharePoint was really good. It was doing loads of cool stuff. And then 2013 came along, and they made so many changes. One of the first changes was the minimal interface. I've got a few kind of steps here and screenshots, but I'm just going to flick past them really quick. So one of the things as we went into 2013 was the new minimal interface that we continue to use in 2016. By minimal, the main thing we mean here is it became simplified. So there's less buttons. Even though in some cases there's more functionality, which seems a strange idea, there's less buttons, there's less colors. Look at you know, this gray and these boxes and these borders and these fonts and all these different things going on in 2010. They said, nope, let's simplify the whole thing. We almost want to make 2013 like a blank canvas, and then if someone is a branding person, they can brand it and make it look good. And actually companies don't always have to brand it because it actually looks nice and clean by default now. In 2010 and 2017, everyone was branding stuff to stop it looking like SharePoint. Moving forward, people generally are feeling less like they have to do that. Don't get me wrong, the sites could still be branded in different ways, but people are feeling less like they have to do it now. So this minimal interface included not only a simpler interface, which we continue to use in 2016 with some changes that we're about to see, we also got to drag and drop. So we can drag and drop to move navigation, we can drag and drop to upload documents, we can drag and drop to move documents between libraries or put them into folders. We could drag files from a SharePoint library to a desktop or from the desktop to a SharePoint library. So we can just drag a lot, pretty much is the story. We continue to be able to do all that in 2016 unless you're using the Edge browser. So I'm afraid Microsoft's Edge browser gets a bit of a bad, you know, it doesn't do very well in SharePoint. The Edge browser that we get with Windows 10 is not fully supported. It doesn't do everything. So drag and drop is one thing it doesn't do, for example, at the moment. Just very briefly here, just in simple terms, what it means is I can go edit, for example, here, and I can rearrange everything. So again, we can continue to be able to do this, but I can drag things up and down, or I can drag things into there. For example, here's a quick one. If I go to my pages library and I want to have a link to my new test page that I built, dead easy. I can go edit, I can drag that test page link in, I can go save. So again, if you've been working in 2007 or even parts of 2010, creating this navigation was just never so easy before. Also earlier on I dragged, we could drag, if I was in the right library, that would help. I dragged earlier on and we didn't make a big deal of it, but you can drag up to 100 files and you get a progress bar now as well telling you what's going on. Little word of warning there, I got very excited when I first heard that we can drag and drop, and then what I realised was you can't always drag and drop. Microsoft do this quite a lot. They bring out a new feature and they get it working in a particular place like a team site, and then they never ever ever go back and make that new feature work everywhere. So particularly, this is still a limit at the moment in 2016 as well, in a team site or a project site you can drag everywhere. Yeah, loads of dragging, great. In a publishing site, so if you go new site and you select one of the publishing type sites, there's quite a few things in there you can't drag. So you can't drag between libraries in a publishing site. So it's a little bit inconsistent. So don't, and this is a good general rule going forwards, don't just assume that, oh, Rob said we can do this, therefore it will definitely work everywhere in SharePoint 2016. And that's not always the case. I wish it was, it would make my life easier, but it's typical SharePoint. You can say you can drag, unless you're in this type of site, in which case you can't use all of those options. Or unless you're in the Edge browser, in which case not all of that will work. The workaround, by the way, for using the Edge browser, which doesn't work properly, is to not use the Edge browser, to use Internet Explorer. So that's current Microsoft advice. Edge is not the cutting edge. Hopefully one day it will be. Otherwise they're going to have to give up that name, but at the moment it's still Internet Explorer for SharePoint. Right, quick changes. Navigation, the breadcrumb trail got shorter and it continues to be short in 2016. For example, this is a really quick one, but is a key one for people coming from those older versions. If I'm in the ribbon up here and I've got a folder, so if I go and make a new folder, let's call it bad because mostly we don't like these folders at the minute. When I'm looking in the ribbon here, the breadcrumb trail, which is this area here that I'm talking about, is always quite short now. So typically within here, what it used to do in the older versions is it would show you your whole breadcrumb trail. So if I made another folder, let's call it January, and I went into that, what would have happened in the older versions is across the top it would say we're in January, which is in bad, which is in documents. What happens now is it'll only ever show me 2 levels, and that's partly to be more touchscreen compliant and mobile device compliant. So in here it tells you where you are and one level above you, and all you do is you tap to go up, and then you tap again to go up again until eventually you're at the top. Okay, so the breadcrumb trail seems a small thing, but it's one of the first things that end users tend to notice. Where's the trail gone that tells me where I am? And the answer is Microsoft have minimalized it. They've cleaned it up, and that means they've basically trimmed it down. So there's not really choices to change that by default. You just have this new minimal. Minimal is a positive way of thinking of things that are smaller. So you've got this minimal, much cleaner, but less detailed breadcrumb trail. Navigate up actually is no longer available by default, or if you find it, it doesn't do very much. So again, very briefly, for those of you coming from those older versions, what you used to get is around here somewhere, and navigate up a little folder with a green arrow next to it. You could click and you could come way up in the structure, even to through subsites. If you do find navigate up nowadays, which is tucked away in the library tab, all it does is it takes you one level up every time you press it. So navigate up pretty much ceased to exist, and it's the same in 2016. So with this minimal interface, we've got loads of benefits, but also we found some of the things that we relied on quite a lot have disappeared. One of the reasons perhaps that we don't need so much navigation is we're being encouraged not to have folders within folders. Okay, so we're being encouraged to keep our structures not as deep, and we're also being encouraged not to have too many subsites. So ideally we shouldn't have subsites within subsites within subsites. So with that in mind, we don't need such breadcrumb trails so often, but it still does take a bit of getting used to. So anyone jumping up to 2013 or to 2016, the navigation components can feel a bit more restrictive. Search, as we move up to 2010 search, I'll come to some of these questions in a moment. There's a few bits coming in that are a little bit off topic. I'll come to some of those in a moment, if that's okay. Search, as we move into 2013 and 2016, search becomes much more customizable within an individual site collection. So you get a load more search settings. So for those of you that are used to like 2007, 2010, just to give you an idea, if I go settings, site settings, have a look at this in 2016, I get a whole search menu here. So as an individual site owner, there's loads of search stuff I can configure, and also, well, just cut the top edge of it there, but as a site collection administrator, I also get loads of search. Part of the reason this has happened, that we've gained loads more search options as we've moved to 2013 and above, is that fast search. So I think I have this mentioned on one of the other slides, but just to mention this in terms of the language that we said before, this thing called fast search. It used to be a separate product. So Fast Search, which was a separate product, was merged as part of SharePoint 2013. So when we moved up to SharePoint 2013 or above, we got this Fast Search by default. And one of the benefits, as we said, was that site owners and site collection administrators can configure it to some extent. So you don't have to be a farm level admin to change some of the behaviors around search. So I'm not going to do too much on search today, but just some brief benefits here. We get search callouts. So when you've performed a search in any of the newer versions, so 2013 upwards, it shows you a series of results. You sort of 10 blue links, Google style. When you hover over one, it then appears with a callout. So that callout gives you some context-sensitive information. So if you hovered over a Word document, for example, it might tell you about the content of the Word document. It might tell you who worked on it most recently and whether they're online at the moment. It also gives you some other things that are going to sound really insignificant, but these are really important. When I've found a file, often I think that's not the file I want, but that sounds like it's the right sort of file. What I could then do is go View Library. So I could click to view the library and then go and see that file in its location alongside all the other files that are in that library as well. So to have just this much nicer search experience. We gained, going forward, continuous crawl. So your search server can be set so it crawls all the time, rather than find new information every hour or every 6 hours or every 24 hours as it used to be on some of the older ones. We can have this continuous crawl, so it'll start searching. When it's finished searching, it starts over again. So potentially what used to be a delay where you'd upload a file and people couldn't search for it for 6 hours, 10 hours, whatever it was, depending on your configuration. Assuming you've got a good enough, a robust enough search server, we can use this continuous crawl if you switch that on, and that means having uploaded things, files appear much more quickly. Promoted results allow us to customize search so that when someone searches for a particular word or phrase, we can force certain results to the top. Used to be called best bets in 2010, now renamed to promoted results. So we can do that as well. And then the search web parts. So this is a cool roll-up web part that we still have in 2016. This is probably one of the best web parts available now. There's an example here. These are pictures that are stored in 3 different site collections in the SharePoint environment. So these are 3 pictures that were uploaded, let's say today. On a page, perhaps a wiki page, I've added the search web part. I've configured it to show the 3 newest photographs regardless of where they are in the farm. So the search web part is looking across the whole farm based on the search index, which we said is up to date, more up to date than it ever was before. And it's then showing links to those files. So the files are not copied, it is a link. So when people have been using like send to or manage copies and that sort of thing before, quite often now we could use maybe a search web part to provide links to the most up-to-date information. So the information still exists in its original location and the search web part can surface it. This could show the 10 newest Word documents or the 3 newest emails. And again, this can be scoped at the whole farm rather than one site collection. So again, depending on which type of site you're in and which features are switched on, it's pretty cool that we can do all of that. Storing documents, I'm just going to go very quickly. There's some major changes here. I'm not going to talk about them all. Yeah, let's not do them all because we're going to run out of time. But very briefly, all lists and libraries are now called apps. So for example, when you are in 2016, and you go settings, instead of going new library or more options as it used to be called, you go settings, add an app, and then just to have a quick look in here, just to give you an idea, most of the apps are still the same as we had in 2013. Yeah, so there's very, very few things that have changed in here. Yeah. One thing that has changed, and we'll come to this in a moment, by default when you create a document library now and most of the other apps, it switches on versioning by default. So we've got a slide that talks about that specifically, but so lists and libraries are called apps, and by default now in 2016 it will switch on versioning for most of those lists and libraries. I'm not going to go through all of these other ones because there's too many things here to do. I will just mention the share button. So this is something that scared a lot of people when it first came in. So very briefly, there is this share button. The idea is that security is quite complicated. So let's make it simple. Let's make it so that a site owner, for example, could hit share. They could type in the name of an individual or a group of people. They could hit share and automatically this person gets added in to the owners group or the members group or the visitors group, whichever we select. So the share button made it quick and easy to share either sites or individual documents. We're going to find there's some slight changes to that in 2016, so we'll come back to that in a moment. But the idea is share is a shortcut that allows you to quickly deal with security. Not to remove security, but to actually allow people into your site or documents. These other things here I'm not going to go through. Manage metadata now works in what used to be called the datasheet view, or now known as the quick edit view. So in 2010, manage metadata came in, the central database for terms. In 2013, they then allowed us to use it in the quick edit view. So they slowly were kind of getting to the point where people were happy and things were working consistently. SkyDrive, there was a court case, SkyDrive got renamed, it became OneDrive. So individual users can store files in their OneDrive now. Okay. It's a secure location by default, but from there they could hit the share button and they could share information. There were some changes to features. So the document sets feature was now switched on by default from 2013 upwards. Before you used to have to switch it on yourself. And also workflow features were now switched off. So quite often if you go into a library now and you go to add a workflow, you might find there's no workflows offered to you at all. You might find there's no workflows offered at all. And that's because the workflow templates that Microsoft provided since 2007, they decided, well, maybe we don't need them anymore. So the good news is the workflow templates are there, they're features, and you go and switch them on. So then when you go to a library and go to add a workflow, you have your features back. So as far as I've seen so far, there's no improvements to workflow. There was just this idea that by default, Microsoft don't offer you their feedback and approval workflows. So in 2013 upwards, you have to go and switch the feature on for workflows, and then those come back. So they are there, they're just hidden by default. So other than that, there's no really major changes going into 2016 around the workflow side. Very briefly, just before we jump onto the 2016 for the last 15 minutes, site templates. So there's no more workspaces, there's no more blank site templates. What's happened is the team site has become the blank. So team sites effectively are pretty much empty. So when you first get a team site in 2013 and 2016, you get a document library, you get a news feed, you get a search box, but other than that, you don't really get anything. So there's no calendar, no task list. So you'd have to be careful when you're moving from kind of 2010 up to 13 or 16. If you say, oh, I want a team site, that now means you just want a fairly empty site. So we're not going to go through every template, but just the idea that there's less templates and the ones you have changed to be simplified. There were some changes to security that we still have in 2016 as well. So by default, if you create a team site now, the security for the members of the team site will be the edit permissions. They will no longer have contribute, instead they get edit. Okay, so you have to be careful with that. You add someone in as a member of your team site, they can now do all sorts of things, including creating apps, switching off versioning, maybe even editing navigation. So by default now, members are much more trusted than they ever used to be before. But only in team sites, not in publishing sites, for example. So you need to be careful with some of these. Publishing I'm going to do for 2 seconds. You can now resize pictures. So if we've got a publishing site, you can select a picture on your page. You can select a rendition and resize your picture. You can also include or use animated GIFs that will spin around on the page. So Microsoft don't give you any, but if you've got an animated GIF of a dancing cat, which obviously you're going to have a GIF of a dancing cat, you could put it in and it will dance, which is great. Social, there's loads of improvements. For now, though, I'm going to jump. Because we're in our last 10 minutes, I'm going to go through and we're going to hit just pure 2016 changes. This is going to shock you a bit, so get ready. So here's the 2013 site, and here's the 2016 site. Don't worry, I've not got the wrong picture. All I've done here is I made the colors the same. So I've got a 2013 site and a 2016 site, and I had them side by side on my 2 screens, and I literally changed the colors and the logos to be basically the same, and I put the same content into them more or less. And what I found is, to begin with, I thought, hang on a minute, there must be something wrong. It doesn't seem to change. The good news was I looked closer and I found there was loads of changes. So we're going to break these down in a bit more detail in a moment, but in 2016 we now have the app launcher. The site settings icon has slid across to the left a bit, so it's a bit further away. This is a good one. Slightly further away from the Internet Explorer settings icon. So these two used to be like right underneath each other, so they've pushed it a bit so that hopefully I remember to go into the right one now. So they've pushed it, which is a small thing, but it's definitely helped me. Share has been improved, so we'll hit that in a second. The recycle bin link is now added by default to your site quick launch. We get more ribbons. So customers of Office 365, users of Office 365, are still telling Microsoft they can't find options. The reason for that is basically they're saying, hey, I'm in a library, I want to do something, and in the older versions there was none of these buttons here. So they'd be in a library and thinking, right, what do I do? I'm not sure what to do. What Microsoft was expecting was they'd go to the File tab and they'd hit something, or they'd drag and they'd kind of find their own way. What Microsoft have done now is they've added in an extra ribbon. There's nothing new in there. It's just shortcuts to get to these same things. And we've had these, I know, in Office 365 for a while, but SharePoint 2016 is the first version of SharePoint to bring some of these ribbons down into the main page. Okay. We have search box now when we're on the page itself, even when we're looking at a web part, so we can search against a web part without going to the library. And then we have some more intuitive notes. So again, when we're looking at a page with a web part, it's telling me drag files here. It's trying to encourage me to do some of the things that have been possible for ages, but it actually flags up now. You can do this stuff here. You can upload here. So a lot of these changes are small things, but they're things where people have said to me several times, I wish this shortcut was always here. I wish that wasn't so close. I wish there was some more choices around the share options. So I think Microsoft has listened to what people wanted. So that's a good start. So let's blast through for the next few minutes to get this done. So we just said a few of these. The user interface now has the waffle, okay, or officially called the app launcher. So the same as people have been used to in Office 365. So very briefly, when I'm here in SharePoint, I can always click on the app launcher and it's giving me access in my setup to my OneDrive, which is my own, the new equivalent of what was the SkyDrive, which is now the OneDrive. It's my own personal file storage. We have Newsfeed, which is where I could manage my profile, and also I can see things that I've followed. So they're all available to me there, plus whatever other software I've got installed. We've seen the more ribbons on the page. We can also pin sites to the top in the sites window. So what that means is I can come in, I could choose to follow a site that I'm interested in. So I can choose to follow a site that I'm interested in. When I've followed the site, I can then go into the sites window. The sites window, if you've not worked with that before, is a directory of all the sites that you own and you follow. You own or you follow. So within here, for example, let's say the news site is one that I need to get to on a regular basis. I can now go in and I can pin that to the top of this sites window. This is good for me because this window gets very busy if you're the owner of lots of sites. So here I can go pin, and all it means is whenever I'm moving around in here and I come back to sites, it always pushes that one to the top. So you can pin whichever ones are most useful to you up at the top. So you follow things and then you can pin them to the top. So the new bit there for 2016 is the pin to top. We now have some changes to security that are new to 2016, including sharing folders. And again, you might think that seems bizarre that Microsoft have chosen to improve what you can do with folders. But again, I think it's based on feedback. People are saying, I want to create folders still, even though you're telling me to tag and do other stuff. I'm still going to create folders in certain situations. And what I really want to be able to do is make folders and secure them as I go. So in 2016 now, if I go new folder, when I'm creating a folder, so let's call this Reports 2017, this new button's here to invite people. So if I go in here, I could say, I know there's someone called Penny, and I also have a colleague called Steve. Neither of them have access to this site, but they need to look at these reports. So what I could do is I could select them. I could choose to make them visitors or contributors or editors, if you want to call it that. I could email them. I don't really need to for now because this is a fictitious environment, and away we go. So that has just done something that it's really cool, but also really scary. So what that's done is made a folder with custom permissions. Those extra people, Steve and Penny, can only get to this folder. They can't get to the whole site. Yep, so they can only get to the folder. They can't get to the whole site. The reason this is scary is potentially what I just did there could have been done by a member of the site. So a member of the site in a team site can change the permissions of part of the site. So they're not an owner, they're a member. So this is a little bit of a change. Okay? So typically, to change the permissions of a site, to actually make permissions apply, you need to have at least the approval of an owner. In this case, I am not an owner, for example, just as an example, and I can still share a folder. Okay, so potentially, oh, there's my declare button appeared now. So that's pretty scary. So I do have some little notes on that, and I'll just show you where the settings are. So let me just jump to where we are in this. So just to show you here, so what's controlling some of these options, and particularly whether people can create and share a folder as a member, is there's a little tick box here that I'll show you where it is in a moment. You can see here, allow members to invite other members to the site members group. Yeah. So so just to confirm, let me go ahead and show you this in here. So what's allowing, okay, no worries, yes. So what's allowing them to do this is if I go to settings, site settings, and within here, if I go to site permissions, the thing that's letting these guys do this, the new option, is here, access request settings, which has been around for a while, but the newer bit is just here. So for example, if I was to untick allow members to share the site and individual files and folders, if I untick that, that's the thing that's controlling this. And again, this could change for the final release, but at the moment, when we've tested it in this build, this is what's happening. And again, we were surprised as much as you are, I suspect. So if I go in and try and do this again now, and in fact, if I log in as a member to do that, so let me just log in as a member to make this a fair test. Yep. So if I come in, let's try that again. So new folder and invite. See what happens this time? The site owner doesn't allow sharing. You see that? So by going and switching that off, we've effectively switched off that sharing option in there. Bizarrely, switching that off does not switch off the share button here, and also it does not switch off the share button, which is also up here somewhere. Where are we going? Which is here. So I've switched off the invite button here, but potentially members of the site could still press share. They could still type in that they want to share the whole site with Penny, and they could still hit share. What happens then behind the scenes though is that becomes a share request. Okay, so that becomes a share request. So switching this off basically, and again this is still not the final release version, but switching this off in the build that we have right now, which is the newest available, switching this off stops people sharing the new folder option. People can still hit the share button and choose to share the site. If you are a member of the site, so like an editor or a contributor, and you choose to share, and this is switched off, what happens is it becomes a share request. Okay. And we had share requests in 2013, so that's kind of going back to how it worked in there. So if you're a member of the site and you go and do a share of the whole site, which is the button at the top right, it becomes a share request. The share requests interface has been optimized. So imagine if there's a new site and it's very busy and there's loads of content being shared. So there's loads of people saying, I want to share this, I want to share that, I want to share that. As a site owner, I can go into the share request window and I can go in and approve those requests with one click. So it used to be you'd have to click a few times to go and share. Now you can go in and do it pretty quickly. So if I go and show you that, I know we are just running out of time now. We're just going over time, but we're nearly there. I've got a few other things to show you for anyone that can stick around. Bear in mind we're recording this as well, so after the session's finished, it'll take probably a couple of days, but we will make this video available. So apologies for overrunning slightly. I might have bitten off more than I could chew within an hour by choosing so many topics, but I wanted to share as much as we could within the hour. So anyway, I've gone ahead as a member of the site and I've chosen to share the site. If I then log back in, so if I go and log back in as my original user, so if I go and log back in as my original user here, if I'm the owner at this point, which I am, and I go settings, site settings, and I go into this access request window, what I can see in the access request window is effectively it tells me that there was a user called Rob. Rob came in and tried to share the site, and Rob did this at a particular date and time, and we can see what they were trying to do. So from within here, I can get rid of that window. Oh no, don't crash on me. There we go. It was trying to crash on me, but I think we got away with it. So from within that window, what I could do as a site owner is I could approve it. So this interface here, we did have this interface in 2013, but it's just a bit cleaner now. So I can go and approve with one click. So if there's 7 or 8 things waiting for my approval, I can now just zip down them and really easily approve them all. So behind the scenes, it will have actually added Penny into the site owners group, but the share button was a different way of instigating it. So that's pretty cool. So just to confirm, in 2013 we had share, we could share from here, and it basically worked in the same way. The bit really that was new was when we went to share a folder, and also the idea that by default, if we're not careful, with a team site again in particular was where I've been testing, by default, when a normal user, a member of the site comes in, they can create a folder and they can manage the security of it. Just to mention this, sign in as different user, no, that's not there by default. We've added that in just because this is a demo environment. So by default, no, you still don't get sign in as different user. I added that in just for this environment. Yeah. Right, and I know we're overrunning, so keeping this fairly short and sweet now. Some other significant changes, real simple ones. By default, when you create a document library within a site, it has versioning enabled, major versioning, and up to 500 versions. So rather than no versioning, which is what we used to get. You can now use more special characters within your file names. So if you've got a file name that includes an ampersand and it's stored on a network drive, and you used to drag it into SharePoint and it would go file not recognized, and it was very annoying, you won't get that error anymore. So in 2016, tilde, braces, leading full stops and ampersands can all be used in file names. I don't know if it's a good idea to use them all really, but you can use them and it will let you upload. you still can't use percentage or hash. You can use a variety of keyboard shortcuts when you're in a document library. So again, makes sense. We want to be able to use keyboard shortcuts, so that's nice and neat. Microsoft have made it so that it's up to you now how big you set your individual file size to be for maximum file size. But Microsoft are recommending you can go up to 10 gigabytes now for an individual file. So it doesn't have to be. Oh, what's my screen doing? For some reason, my screen resolution just changed, and as it did that, rearranged. So bear with me a second. Let me just check that you can still see what I'm doing. Yeah, it still looks fine. Sorry about that. My screen resolution changed all of a sudden. So, so by default, it's still going to be lower than 10 gigabytes. But if you need to in your environment, you could set it up to 10 gigabytes. I think you can even go higher, but Microsoft say if you go in higher than that, even if you've got a good network set up, things are probably still going to time out. Yeah, so the limit now is more based on your common sense rather than it being a hard limit in the software. So 10 gigabytes per file. And then as we just get into the last couple of slides here, just a couple of cool things to mention. I'm not going to demo these because we're kind of getting away a little bit then from the end user stuff and it's getting a bit more technical, but very briefly, we do get one new type of site, which is a compliance policy center. And this is something we've had for a while over on Exchange Server. So in Exchange Server, there's been things like this for a while, and we get this stuff now in SharePoint. So the Compliance Policy Center is a new site template. So alongside team sites, project sites, blogs, and so on, we now have this Policy Compliance Center. You can create it as a top-level site, so at the top of a site collection. What you can then do is you can do a couple of things from there. So you can set up your deletion policies. At the moment in SharePoint 2010, for example, you might go through and you set up what's called a information management policy, and within there you can say files that have not been deleted, files that have not been modified for 4 years should automatically get deleted. Yep. So at the moment you might do that within a particular site in SharePoint. You might set this auto delete. What the Compliance Policy Center lets you do, one of the things it lets you do is say, right, I want to set that for all of my team sites, yeah, or all of my OneDrives. So you can say, right, all of my team sites, if a file has not been modified for 5 years, automatically delete it. So you can set up that auto delete process. Obviously, we have to be very aware of the information that's stored in our sites to be able to do that. And you don't have to just blindly apply it to everywhere. You can apply some of these things, like the deletion policies, you can apply either to individual site collections. So you can say within a particular site collection that you can refer to, again, if something's not modified for 5 years, then delete it. Yeah. So this is to answer a common problem that customers have where their environments basically grow forever. Their environments grow, they're paying per gigabyte of data to store or megabyte of data to store, and the environments grow forever. So on premises, they got away with it, you know, bought bigger hard disks and so on. And maybe, you know, hard disks are cheaper than they used to be, but it's something that ideally when we're setting up SharePoint, we should be thinking about how are we going to maintain this within the next 5 years. So these deletion policies means that at a farm level now, we can actually have this auto delete set up. The good news is it's really easy to use. I've not got time today to really go through and demo it, but just knowing it's called compliance policy, and actually there's this blog here which is really good. So if you search for Steve Smith and DLP, which is data loss prevention. So Steve's one of my colleagues here, and he's written this fantastic blog which has got loads of diagrams and pictures of it working. So he'll show you in there, it's a step-by-step blog on how to configure deletion policies. Also in that blog, so again, if you search for Steve Smith and DLP, so Steve Smith DLP, if it doesn't come up, just stick SharePoint 2016 on the end and it definitely will. He also shows you in there how to set up data loss prevention. So this is the idea that if we've got sensitive information, that's being stored in SharePoint, what we're able to do is detect that information. And there's two different points at which that can work. First of all, there's kind of preemptive. So as people upload files or modify files, we've got an example here. We've got a site collection that's set up with a data loss prevention policy in place. And what's happening is when someone uploads a file that includes credit card details or other sensitive information, then it's going to flag up, and at that point potentially it could say you've uploaded sensitive information, and then it could flag that, it could alert someone, and it could then stop them working on it anymore. Or it could just be a notification. Did you realize this file seemed to contain sensitive information? And then at that point they can say, oh yeah, I'm doing something in particular, I need to do this, and they can override it. So depending on the scenario, there's some pretty cool stuff that's available around this data loss prevention. The other side to that is if we're able to identify files as they're uploaded, another way we could do it is, right, maybe we're 6 months down the line and we never applied any policies, and we're thinking, oh, we should have done that, what can we do now? What we could do is, without having any policies in place, we could go into our e-discovery site and we could run a data loss prevention query. What this allows us to do is say, right, based on the existing environment that we have, are there any files out there that contain sensitive information that perhaps should not be stored in SharePoint? So with this, we're able to run a query. You don't have to build the queries. You can do, but by default, there's a series of existing queries. And again, they're the same queries, I believe, pretty much that have been on Exchange Server for a while. So they're queries that can detect credit card details, social security numbers, general banking details, all those sorts of things it looks out for. So you can run a query, and one of the cool things with the query is you can say, run a query, tell me what's out there, and then give me a download of them all. And what I'll do is I'm going to sit offline and I'm going to read through them, and then I'm going to choose to action them. I'm going to deal with them somehow. So that's pretty cool. There's a whole story there around this data loss prevention queries. So they're dead easy to set up. There's a series of them. There's a bit of a wizard that goes with it, and you do that in your e-discovery site. So you'd make a new site. It would be an e-discovery site, and away you go. So I know we've overrun by more than 10 minutes now, so just to kind of wrap things up, again, I will make sure my email address is on here to follow up on some of these other questions that I need to check on. But just to follow up, things that we don't get. So everything we said so far we're going to get. By going to 2016, you get cumulative all the benefits from all the software, which is great. And also, if you're in Office 365, effectively you're already on SharePoint 2016. Yeah, you're already there, basically. So you get all these benefits. Things that you won't get going forwards, things that are going to be removed, tags and notes. This is not a surprise. Tags and notes is the tags and notes button in the ribbon. It's not tagging using columns. It's not manage metadata. It was a button called tags and notes that no one ever really used, or not many people. So that's going to be gone. So there's a button in the ribbon in a library or a page called tags and notes. That's not going to be supported anymore. I don't think that's new news. People haven't been using that, and we've been told for a while now it's going. Bit more of a shock, Excel services. So before, if we had SharePoint on premises, typically if we'd gone for the Enterprise Edition, we would get Excel services. That would mean we can do loads of cool stuff with business intelligence. We could show part of an Excel spreadsheet embedded into a page. So someone would hit a page and they could see the content of the spreadsheet. Really cool, very impressive for like a reporting dashboard. So by default, if you just buy SharePoint and you don't buy anything else, you will no longer get the ability to do things like embed Excel spreadsheets into a page. So that's a bit of a loss. So the functionality for that has been taken out of SharePoint. I guess it didn't really sit there very well. It's an Excel thing, really. And then the new thing that it's going to be described as now is Office Online Server Preview. So for SharePoint 2016, that's where this functionality will now be, in the Office Online Server Preview. That's what that's being called at the moment. That stuff has been called Office Online, and it's had a few different names, but apparently it's Office Online Server Preview is where that's gone to. Foundation Edition no longer available. So in previous versions of SharePoint, we've had WSS or SharePoint Foundation 2010 or 13. And these have been the entry-level versions of SharePoint, where you only get team sites, you don't get publishing, you don't get so much search functionality. It's been kind of the entry-level SharePoint. So at some point now, Microsoft have decided they don't need to do that anymore. They don't need an entry-level. SharePoint's in the market, I guess. Enough people are using it now. So we're not going to have any more the Foundation Edition. Okay, so it's always going to be server. Single server installs. This is a bit technical again, but for those of you that are developers, so you can still set up a development environment with SharePoint 2016 on a single server. So you could have your database and SharePoint all on one server, but that's no longer supported. So I guess what used to be like small business server that would have SharePoint on one server alongside email and loads of other stuff, going forward, that won't be a possibility. They're saying SharePoint now is, it uses so much resource with all the functionality it has and the search and so on. it really is not designed to run on a single server where the database and SharePoint are all on one server. So as a minimum, we have 2 servers, one for SharePoint and one for SQL Server. Potentially, you know, again, as soon as you start talking to Microsoft, it's going to be more than 2 realistically. Maybe it's going to be 4 or 5 for redundancy. So definitely not 1 anymore, other than for testing and demos. We already mentioned that Edge, if you have if you have Windows 10, for example, or another device that's using Edge, you're not going to get much joy with that in SharePoint 2016 at the moment. So Microsoft are listing the workaround as don't use Edge, use Internet Explorer, particularly if you try and drag and drop to move files, or you try and use the Explorer view in SharePoint. None of those work in Edge. It's not just they don't work on your machine, they just don't work for anyone. Okay. So apologies for overrunning by a good 15 minutes there. I'm sorry, that is my fault entirely. I would just say thanks for joining me today.